We did that last week, the Mishnah on Tana 38b. The art scroll is 38b2. We were focusing on the Mishnah where the Mishnah talks about a Tana, right? Because we said there's different types of ovens. We said something called a Tana, something called a Kupa, something called a Kira. And we spoke about the Tana, and we said that the Tana is the most strict. And we said that the Tana is wide on the bottom, it's narrow on top. It contains the heat very very well. And in contrast to the Kupach and the Kira, which is more like rectangular, right? More square-like, correct? Therefore, it doesn't keep the heat as well, and therefore there was a stringency, we said, by the Tanur, by more than the other two ovens, and we said that the Kupach, it's in the middle. So the Kupach is like an oven that only has room for one pot, in contrast to the Kira, which has two pots, and therefore the two pots, there's more openings, and therefore it's not as hot. So now the Mishnah says the following: Tanur Shisikur. The Gemara. You got the Gemara? Gemara, right? Tana Shisikur. The Mishnah stated a Tana that was heated. You can't place. We said if the Tana was heated up and the Mishnah stated even if it was heated up with kasha gavla, even with the straw of the stubble, it said that you can't go ahead and place food not inside this tanur, not on top of the tanur. The Gemara says, what does it mean you can't place food on top of this tanur? So the Gemara says, some remissive lemema, tocho mamash. You can't, when the Mishnah stated you can't put food inside the tanur, it means directly inside. And when it says al gabav, on top, it means al gabav mamash. You can't, if you want to send to the group, Adam, that when it's al gabav, it refers to literally placing the food on top of the tanur. Avolismoch, but if I wanted, to go ahead and place food alongside the wall of a tanur, let's say the tanur is on, we'll say and you want to put food next to its wall, and the food is heating up through the wall of the tanur, shapidami. You could go ahead and place food before the Shabbat. You could place food against that wall. Just like you could go ahead, we said earlier that if you have a kira, stove that was lit before Shabbat, and even though you did not cover the stove with ash, you could go ahead and place food on the side of that wall of that kira before Shabbat. So too, you should be able to go ahead and place food on the side of this tanur, because the Mishnah is stating the only thing you can't go ahead and do regarding this tanur, you can't place food before, on top of the tanur or inside the tanur. But the inference is that if you're only telling me the top is a problem, the inside is the problem, certainly. But the inference is that the side, the wall is good. Outside, leaning outside against the wall of the tanur would be good. Because if you can't even place food on the side, so just tell me the side you can't place, and therefore I would definitely know you can't place on top, right, or inside. So that's what Rav Yosef is saying. Even though regarding other aspects, the tanur, this oven, is more strict than a kira, but regarding this aspect of putting food against the wall from before Shabbat, Now, what was the logic would be that we're not afraid that you're going to go ahead and stoke the oven or the oven because you want to increase the heat in this food that's outside against the wall of the oven. Number one, it might not really add significantly because it's outside, so therefore you're not so worried about you're going to come stoke it, or it's not common to stoke something for the purpose of something that's outside of it. So it's not the normal way people do things. So therefore, um, we don't have to worry about you coming to stoke anything. Therefore, what's the main issue that we've been speaking about? The concern that by leaving food before Shabbat in a situation that where the food is not cooked or whatever it is, you might come to stoke the fires. But here, when it's outside, where you're leaving the food, you're not leaving it inside. You're not leaving it on top of the fire. You're leaving it outside the oven against the wall. So we're not very little concerned that we should have. You can come to stoke this fire. Right. I'm still putting it up, but the amount of heat that it's really eating is not so significant enough that I have to be, as concerned. And also, maybe you could say a logic that the fact that it's since that's not the normal way. I mean, it's not the normal way of cooking so much. So maybe we're not, maybe it might even serve to you as a reminder not to go ahead and to stoke it because you didn't do it in the normal way. Perhaps we could say like that. I mean, maybe we got to look back. Morning, Ralph.
Morning, Rabbi.
We got to look back on Lamed Zion on 37, where the Gemara spoke about Somchim, where the Gemara spoke about the issue of leaving food. Back on the right, the Gemara had the question of smicha. The Gemara earlier had the question about leaving food against the wall of a kira, right? So we got to go. Right, the Gemara had the question back on Lamed Zayin. Iboyulahu. Good morning, Asaf. Mao Lismov. Could you go ahead if on the wide lines on 37a, the wide lines, the Gemara had a question, can you go ahead and lean food against the wall of a kira, right? And that question, what was the issue? What's the possible reason why we should be allowed to? Is so it says like this. So let's take a look. If you look at 37, you go back to your art scroll, 37A.
A what?
Let's take a look at 37A. So that's A3. Let's see. A3. You got it? 37A3. You got it? So what is the top of the page? Iboilu. They ask the question. Ma lismos. What is the law with respect to placing pot of food alongside the exterior wall of the kira that was not shoveled or banked? Right? Do we say there's only placing the foot? Morning, Simon. Welcome back. Is it only inside the kira or on top of it's forbidden, but placing it alongside is acceptable or not? Right? Now, so what's the explanation of that question? If you look at the note 17, so he says, However, you see from the right side on the bottom in the note. However, perhaps it is permitted to place the pot outside the kir next to the wall, even though the wall is hot. The outside the kir is not as hot as the top, and it's not usually used for cooking. Okay, let's take a. It's not the usual. I think in the other Gemara with commentary, it's done a little bit more. 37. Let's take a look at their commentary. When they explained the Gemara's question of can you lean, Simon, the question is, can you lean a pot against a wall, the outside wall? This is the oven outside, leaning the pot against the outside wall. It's hot before Shabbat. So here the commentary says, let's see what he says over here. He says, that you put the fact that you put the pot not on top of the stove, against the wall of the stove, shows you only want to keep the heat of the stove. This is the logic I'm speaking of. Good morning, Jaime. Welcome back.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We're discussing on Friday afternoon before Shabbat. Can I place a pot of food that's a certain amount cooked, and an amount of cooked that we were afraid on Shabbat, if you leave it on the stove, if you leave it on the fire, we're afraid you're going to go ahead and maybe stoke the fire. But here you didn't leave the pot on top of the stove, the fire on. You left the pot where? Right outside the stove, against the wall of the oven, of the stove, and therefore are we afraid you're going to come stoke the coals that are burning in the oven to help the whatever cooking is happening with the pot that's outside the stove. So the Gemara earlier concluded when you're dealing with a regular stove, the stove that we call a kira, the Gemara said it was allowed. And one of the commentaries say that why is it different? Because Adam was asking why should that be different? The fact that you're leaving the food there shows you want it to be hot. So why aren't we afraid you're going to come stoke the coals? So they bring down from Rabbeinu Prachia that he says, you had a choice. You could have put, the fire is raging in that stove, right? In that kira. You had a choice to put it on top of the stove or put it against the wall outside the stove. The fact that you chose to put it on the outside the stove, shows you're not really interested in really cooking it in a real way. Let's say whatever level that it reached, let's say it wasn't fully cooked. Whatever level it reached, you're showing you want to keep to keep that heat, that level of heat going, that it should stay at that level, and you're not looking to hasten to hurry up the cooking process. The concern of stoking the coals is because you're going to want to go ahead and hurry up the process of the cooking. So therefore, what happens is when you rake the coals, now you're making faster cooking. But you showed you're not looking to cook it so fast. You know what he's saying, Adam? But the fact that you placed it outside, you show you don't want it to cook so fast. So therefore, you don't have to be concerned that maybe you're going to come to stoke it. That is what the Gemara said earlier by the kira oven. The Shulchan Aruch Harav says that since it's outside the oven, the stoking won't help so much, won't be so significant, right? When you have something on top of a fire and you stoke that fire, which is much more directly, the benefit is much stronger. So therefore, there's more concern you're going to come stoke it. But when something is outside the oven, only against the wall of the oven, so that benefit is more minimal. So when you have a minimal effect, there's less concern. Those are the two reasons given why. Um, right, you plan to put it right. It's fine according to um, the conclusion of the Gemara earlier. We'll have to look in the halacha and the Shulchan Aruch, but that's what the Gemara concluded earlier by Kira. It would be allowed, and now today, and the same ideas. The question is, could we say the same thing when you come to a much stronger oven? Meaning that was stated by the lower level oven, the oven that doesn't really keep its heat so well. It's the Kira oven. It's the one pot, that has a stove that has one pot on top. That's where the Gemara said that you have the right to lean a pot of food against the wall before the Shabbat. Talking about you lean the pot before Shabbat. We weren't talking about on Shabbat, because on Shabbat, if the food is not fully cooked, you will not be able to lean it next to the wall before Shabbat on Shabbat, because then you're cooking it, right? See, whether you place something inside an oven or outside the oven, if the thing is cooking, it's cooking. So that you wouldn't be able to do on the Shabbat itself, to place the pot that's not fully cooked. But the question is, before Shabbat, can I place this pot that's not fully cooked? Are we afraid I might come, that if I place it before the Shabbat, am I going to come to stoke the fire on the Shabbat itself?
So we know it's allowed for the less hot oven now.
Right. Right. We know it's like Adam said. We know that it is allowed by the less hot oven, by the Kirah. Now the Gemara wants to know about the highest level oven. Interesting that the Gemara didn't address the middle level oven, the Kupach. The Gemara is seemingly saying at this point it would have the same status as a lower level oven, but the Gemara only discusses, or the Gemara is only at least inferring from our Mishnah that even the highest level oven would also have a similar law, that you could place the food alongside the wall of that oven before as long as you did it before Shabbat. At least this is what the Gemara is suggesting at this point. Is inferring, and we're going to see the Gemara is, the Gemara is going to be going back and forth on this issue. This is not something that's a clear point that everybody agrees to, and that. So the Gemara opens up. We opened up today. The Gemara is that the Mishnah stated, when you're dealing with this Tana, with this wide on the bottom and narrow on top oven, we said that you are not allowed to place food inside before Shabbat. You can't go ahead and place food on top. And the Gemara thought that the word, when the Mishnah stated the word on top, al gabav, the Gemara was taking it literally. It means actually on top of the oven, not inside, not on top. But the Gemara was inferring, Rabbi Yosef was thought to say, at least he thought to infer, that the Mishnah is reading the Mishnah literally, that the meaning of al gabav means that the Mishnah is only prohibiting on top of the oven, but on the side, outside the oven, you could place the food outside the oven, the pot outside the oven against the wall of the oven. And that's what the Gemara, how he opens up the Gemara. Tana, so if you look at the Gemara, now we're back to 38. With that background, so we're back to 38b. What is it, 38b 2? So that's why the Gemara opens up. Tana shesiku, when the oven, good morning, Ezra. Tana shesiku, the oven that was heated up, Sover Rabbi Yosef Lameima, Rabbi Yosef thought to say, Tocho mamash. You can't place food directly inside. And you can't go and al gabav mamash. You can't place food on top. Avolismoch shapidami. The Mishnah, but the Mishnah is only forbidding actually inside or on top, but on the side, Simon, you could. That's the inference. Because if on the side you can't, so why to tell me the bigger chidush? Tell me the bigger novel thing. Just tell me that you can't even put it. Why tell me you can't put it inside and on top? Just tell me you can't put it on top and on the side. If it's true that on the side is forbidden, so why only limit the prohibition? Why does the Mishnah only being talking about the top? Adam, you hear what I'm saying?
Mhm.
If the Mishnah is telling me a law, and the Mishnah, right, presents the law, as Mr. Haber would say, case, right? What's the case? The law, the reason, right? What is the case of the Mishnah? The case, if we're translating the words of the Mishnah, al gabav, on top, the Mishnah, right, Ralph, is only telling us I can't put food before Shabbat in the stove, in the oven, on top of the oven, but on the side, if you don't tell me it's a problem on the side, the inference is that it's good on it's permitted on the side. Because if on the side it is not permitted, so why don't you tell me that?
Because side, top is also side. The left side, the right side, top side, bottom side. It's also a side.
Right, but usually if you say they're on top, say if you say on top, so if this is the oven, so usually on top means literally here, not here. Right, that's what the Gemara at this, but we'll see if the Gemara is going to switch or not. But at the al gabav on top, usually the literal translation is on top, not over here. This would be the oven. This is the side, right, Asaf? But if you tell me on the gabav, sounds like you're only forbidding here, which is a much stronger element of heat coming. But you didn't forbade me against the wall. So that's what the Gemara is what Rabbi Yosef wants to infer from the language of the Mishnah. That's why the Gemara opens up Tana Shesiku, right? The Tana, that stove that was heated up. So Rabbi Yosef Lemeimer, Rabbi Yosef thought to say Tocho Mamash. When you can't place inside before Shabbat. Agabav mamash. You can't place on top of the stove before Shabbat. But avalismo shapidami. But to put something next to it, next to the walls, you're allowed to. That was the Gemara's thought. Rabbi Yosef was thinking. Now, Abaye is going to challenge. We're on 38b2 on the bottom paragraph, column 1. Abaye is going to challenge that idea that Rabbi Yosef is saying. Because he comes and he says, Abaye. Abaye asks, he says, we have the Mishnah, Kupach. We have that. Kupach, we said, is that oven that has a 2-pot, it's a one pot oven. So it contains more heat. It's not as wide. It doesn't have more room for heat to escape. It's not like the kira that has enough of 2 pots. This is the kupach. So what's the kupach? So we said in the Mishnah, and he's gonna bring the challenge from the kupach. Kupach sheisiku bekasha begavva. The 1-pot stove oven that was heated up with the straw and the stubble. So we said, Harihu, if you heated it up with straw or stubble, which is a low-level heat, right? The high-level heat, the better. It's not such a good fuel. A much better fuel is wood or the sesame seeds. After you squeeze this, right? The sesame seeds, you have to get the oil out. The sesame seeds, they give off heat. So that's a much stronger, better fuel. The heat remains, right? When the wood, if you heat up something with wood, the coals remain strong for a long time. So In contrast to straw or stubble, when you heat up something with straw or stubble, what happens to the straw or stubble? It just goes out, right? It doesn't remain. So we said if you have this one pot stove, which keeps the heat more than the two-pot stove, but it's not as powerful as the tanur, which is wide on the bottom and narrow on top. So we said the kupa. How do we treat this kupach? Right? How do we treat the kupach, this middle stove? It's not the best stove. Like we have three different stoves on the market. GE is selling three stoves, right? We have the best stove, gives us the most heat. We got the stove, which is middle of the line, and we got the lower level. It's not as right. So, which one? What's the status of each one? So this kupach is the middle of the line stove. It's the middle line. It's not as intense heat as tanur, but it's stronger than the kira. So now, when it comes to laws of Shabbat, how do you treat this kupach stove? Do you give it the same status? Do you give it the same status as the lower level or the higher level, right? And we mentioned that even though the lower level stove, if you cover up the fires, the coals before Shabbat, you put ashes on those on the fires before Shabbat, you remove the coals to the side, remove them in total. We said that you could keep food of any stage of cooking before Shabbat on such a stove, if the stove was a kira, a low level, the lowest level stove. We said, Ezra, right? The lowest level stove, as long as you cover the coals, you're good. You put some ash. You showed you're not interested in the what? You showed you're not interested in the fire because you covered the fire with some ash before Shabbat. We're not afraid you're going to come stoke it. But the highest level, the tanur, that has the highest level heat, that intensely strong stove, covering it, we said, doesn't do any. It's not sufficient. One reason we said because when you cover it right away, because of the intensity of the heat, the cover is not gonna go away, and therefore it's not going to serve its purpose of that you're not going to be interested in that fire because you covered it, because that cover is going to go away and you're going to be you might want to use it, you might want to stoke it. So therefore we said that the tanner covering it is not good enough. Covering before Shabbat, you want to leave food that's not cooked. It's not going to help you by covering. We're afraid you might come to stoke it, to hasten the process. But what about the kupach? Does the kupach get that stringency of the tanur, or does it get the leniency of the kira? The kira, we said, you can just you cover the coal, put some ash on the coals before Shabbat, you're good. Tana, we said, it's no good. Whatever the reason why Tana is no good, either because it's not going to help, the cover is not, whatever the reason why covering it's not going to help by the tanur. But it doesn't help. Covering the coals by the tanur is not good enough. What's the law by the kupach? With the kupach, this middle stage oven, would it have the same stringency as a tanur, or will have the leniency of a kira? Right? So the Mishnah said it all depends. The Mishnah says, how are you heating up the kupach? What's the case? Are you heating the kupach, this middle of the line stove, with straw and stubble? Is that what you're using as your fuel? Or are you heating it up with coals? So the Mishnah stated, if you're heating it up with straw or stubble, we could give you a status of the lower level. You get the leniencies of the lower level oven. But if you're heating it up with wood, with coals, then we're going to give you the status of the tanur. You get the stringency of a tanur, and it won't help to cover it with ash, right? That was the what we said last time, right? That's what the Mishnah stated. Is that clear? So now the Gemara states, Eiteve Abaye. Abaye asks, this is what the Gemara is going to bring. Kupach shesiku b'kasha b'gavava. The kupach, this middle type of stove that you heated with kasha b'gavava, if you heated it with straw stubble, what we say, if you heated the kupach, the middle of the line stove with bad fuel, not such intense fuel, straw stubble just goes out, then we'll give you the leniency like a kira. How are you kikirayim? You have the status of the kira. Is it clear, Ezra? But with gefet, morning. If you heat it with gefet to beitzim, with that sesame seeds, or you heat it with the wood, haru tanur. We give it a status of a tanur, of this high intensely type of oven, and v'asur. And then you will not be able to place the food before Shabbat on top of this kupach, because we gave you the status of a tanur, and cover. Even if you cover the fire, it's not good enough. With the ash, it's not good enough, right? So now the Gemara is analyzing this statement of the Mishnah. The fact that you're telling me, good morning, the fact that you're telling me you're comparing the Mishnah stating like this, the status of that middle of the line stove, when it's heated up with coals, it has the status of a tanur. It has the status of that high tense oven. What is the implication? The implication is, if it would not have the status of, if I would give it the status of a kira, the lower level, then it would be allowed to leave the food there, right? That's what the implication is. Because I gave it a status of the highest tense stove, the tanur, now I can't leave the food there before the Shabbat. And now, so the Gemara says like this: Hooky kira. If I would have gave it the status of a kira, of a lower level stove, shari, it would have been permitted. I would have been allowed to leave the food there before Shabbat if I would have treated the kupach, the middle level stove oven, like a kira. But since I'm treating that middle level oven like a tanur, like the higher level, therefore I can't leave the food there, right? That's what the Gemara is saying. So the Gemara says, "B'mayaskinan." What is the case of the Mishnah? Now, I was saying until now, we were talking about that even when we were saying that about the stove, the oven being covered with ash. So let's see how the Gemara is going to say. Ilema al gabav. Do we say the Mishnah? The case of the Mishnah is placing the food on top of this tanur or on top of this kira, right? What's the case talking about of that it's forbidden? The Mishnah says I can't go ahead and place food on top of this tanur. I'm gonna treat the kupach like or the kupach. I can't put this middle level stove oven. I can't put food on top of this stove because I'm treating it like a tanur. I'm treating it like a high level oven. Ilim al gabav. Does it mean I can't put it on? If I were talking about on top of this kupach, does the words mean on top. B'mai. And what is the situation of this kupach that we're talking about? Are we talking about it's covered? The ash, it's covered with, the fire is covered or not? Ilema because she'ena gorofa katum. If you're telling me that the kira, that this kupach is it's not covered with ash, right? The kupach is, the fire is raging, the cold, the fire is on, and I didn't put any cover on the fire. So then why does the Mishnah need to tell me that you're going to compare this kupach to a tanur? I can't leave food on top of this kupach, because even though it's the middle level heat, because it's stronger than a kira, but since I'm comparing it to the highest level tanur, I can't leave food on top of it. If there's a fire on, not covered, even if you compare it to a kira, a lower level oven, you can't leave food directly on a flame before Shabbat. Doesn't make a difference what level oven you are. You could be the lowest level oven, lowest level heat, but if you have food directly on top of the fire, there's a concern you're going to stoke that fire when Shabbat comes. If you leave food on food that's didn't reach certain levels of cooking before Shabbat, you're going to go ahead and maybe stoke that fire, and the fire is on. You didn't do anything to show you're not interested in the fire. You didn't cover the fire. You didn't put a blech on it. You didn't put ash on it. So there's a concern you're going to go ahead and stoke that fire. Not because even if you're not a tanur, even if you don't have a status of a tanur. So the fact that you're telling me that this kupach, this middle level of stove, the problem is why I can't leave the food on top before Shabbat is because I treat it like a kira, like a tanur, like the highest level. Would indicate that if I would treat it like a kira, a lower level, I would be able to leave the food there. I wouldn't be concerned that I'm going to come to stoke it. Why not? If it's an open fire, I should be concerned. So you have to say the case of the Mishnah is talking about when the fire is covered. That's what the Gemara wants to establish. So the Gemara says, Ilema, if you're going to tell me that it is Kishaina Gorafa Katum, if you're going to tell me that you did not go ahead and move the coals to the side, and you didn't go ahead and cover it with ash, Elakira, so what do you to compare it to a tanur, to a highest level oven? Even Elakira, Ki'ena Gufa Tuma Agaba Mishari. If you have a kira and you did not cover it, you left the lowest level heated, the lowest level power, the lowest power heated oven. If you didn't cover it, you wouldn't be able to go ahead and leave food there directly on the fire, right? Elalav, therefore, the Mishnah, you have to say, Elalav lismoch. We're talking about leaving and the Gemara is thinking, that the case of the Mishnah, the case of the Mishnah, the stove was not covered, and since the stove is not covered, so how could you translate if the stove is not covered? So why do you have to tell me that it's forbidden to place the food on top of the kira, on top of the kupach, because we're equating it to a tanur. Even if we're not equating it to a tanur, you can't keep the food on top. So the Gemara says, therefore you have to say, when it says you can't put the food on top, it can't mean on top, literally. Al-Gabav doesn't, it's like what Simon was learning before. El-Alav l'smoch. The Mishnah is talking about putting next to the wall of this of this oven, of this kupach. And by comparing it to a tanur, I'm saying we're going to compare it to a tanur, and therefore it's going to be forbidden. And that's the chidush. And therefore it's teaching us that you can't go ahead and leave food against the wall of a kupach, the same way you can't go ahead and leave food next to it, the wall of a tanur. So the Gemara wants to prove from here that you can't leave food on a stove that's on a kupach that's on. You can't leave food against the wall before Shabbat, because maybe you're going to come stoke that. You're going to stoke that kupach. You could even stoke that tanur, and therefore the Gemara is holding that you against what the Gemara Rabbi Yosef said before. Rabbi Yosef said before you could leave food next to the oven that's on, as long as it's outside the oven. And now we're saying you can't leave food. That's the inference. We're going to see more tomorrow, more about this. It's a very complicated Gemara, everybody. We're holding a lot going on. We got 3 ovens going on, and we got different fuels going on, and we got different cases going on. We got to keep focused. Have a great day, everybody.
Rabbi, say hello to Simon for me. Is Simon there? Tell him I said hello.
Simon, you have a big fan over here. He's saying
Oh, I
hello.
miss him. How are you?
Good,
How's
No.
everything? Good, I'm good.
wonderful. When are we
Yeah.
gonna see you?
I don't know.
I don't know.
My guess is as good as yours.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
stay well. I hope they're treating you well over there.
Yeah, I'm okay. Okay.
Good.
Good to see you.